So, hello, today is October 1st, 2020, and my name is Helen, and I'm with Emily, and we will be interviewing Pastor Justin Wong from Chinese Baptist Church in Houston, Texas, on behalf of Houston Asian America and American Archive at Rice University. So, first, let's start with your childhood. So, where were you born? And maybe like
Uh,
around when were you born?
okay, so I was born in Fort Worth, Texas,
Mhm.
um, when my parents were going to grad school, and I was born in 1982.
Mhm. Awesome. And do you have any siblings?
I have a younger sister, 4 years younger, and she's actually here in Houston.
Okay. And was she also born in Fort Worth or
No, she once they finished school, we moved to Beaumont,
Beaumont? Okay.
Beaumont, Texas, and then she was born there, and then shortly after, we went from Beaumont to Houston.
I see. And is Beaumont the Bluebell place?
No, that's
Oh,
that's
dang.
somewhere else. That's somewhere else on 290 or something. I don't remember.
Okay. Wait,
I know what
I
you're talking
thought
about
that was
though.
Beaumont. Okay, thank you.
No, Beaumont's like on the way to Louisiana for if you're gonna drive from Houston to
Oh,
to
I
New
see.
Orleans or
And
to
when did you
Louisiana.
move to Houston? Like what age?
86, like right after my sister was born.
Oh, okay. I see.
Yeah,
And what area did you grow up in Houston?
I grew up in Alief,
Okay.
so Chinatown, kind of Bel Air and Boone, that area, like in front of Hong Kong Market.
Yeah. And how would you describe the neighborhood that you lived in? What were like the demographics?
Oh man. Okay, so the reason why we moved there, number one, it was cheap. So again, my dad was the only one working at that
Mhm.
time, and so we had a one income family, and so at that time, Chinatown, Alief was already on the way down, and so real estate was fairly cheap at that moment.
Mhm.
We got our house pretty inexpensive because believe my sister can correct me, but I believe the week or the month before we moved in, there was a police raid on like 10 crack houses on our street, and so we got a pretty sweet deal on our house. So I mean, it was a really rough neighborhood that we grew up in. We would hear gunshots,
Mhm.
gang fights. We've been robbed multiple times, and so the A Leaf at that time, this is like 80s and 90s. It was already kind of getting pretty bad, and so I went to a really rough middle school,
Mhm.
and there was a lot of that. So
Right.
um, yeah, by that time it was predominantly Hispanic. Chinese, not really Chinese at that time. We're moving more towards Sugarland or the
Mhm.
Med Center. Katy wasn't really a big boom yet, but they were
Right.
moving that way. And then it was a lot of Vietnamese and African American.
Yeah. And did
Yeah.
you have a close relationship with your neighbors at all, or were you guys kind of
The ones that were safe. Yeah, I mean, look, growing up, I mean, like we played in the streets. I mean,
right?
again, this is pre-computer, if you can believe that, and definitely pre-cell phone. And
hmm
so we really just played in the streets and stuff. We walked to elementary school, which was like, I
hmm
don't know, 20 minutes away. Um, and so we knew our neighbors. Caddy corner every once in a while. We didn't have like block parties and stuff. It was just, we kind of did our own thing with a couple of people, but that was about it.
Right. And did you ever move anywhere else in Houston?
No, we moved from one house in Alief and then maybe 3 streets down
Okay.
from Alief. So I don't remember why we moved from
Okay.
house to house, honestly.
Yeah. Um, Emily, do you have any?
Yeah. So where were your parents born?
My dad was born in Toisan, right? And then my mom was born in Hong Kong.
Mhm.
So and then I think they met at church in Hong Kong somewhere. Oh no, they met at school
Mhm.
uh, in I forgot the name, Puijing, whatever that is in
Mhm.
English. One of the more popular ones, and then they kind of you know met and moved to America.
Mhm.
Nice. When did they move to the US and what prompted them to move?
Good question. They so my dad's family moved to Philadelphia, and my mom's family moved to Florida. What prompted them was that's a good question. I think originally it was for education, really to kind of moving there. I think it was. I think it's overblown to say persecution, but I think there was a lot more freedoms here, especially around that time. And so I think they wanted to kind of, they were. My dad comes from a family of 4 boys, and then my mom also has a pretty big family. So I think they decided to kind of immigrate here for, I mean, I guess opportunity.
Mhm.
Okay, cool. And when and why did they specifically choose Houston?
I think it was really based off of job availability. Because I mean, we were in Beaumont, right? Of all places, and you don't see a lot of Asian Americans in Beaumont.
Right.
And so I think from Beaumont, I think my dad got offers from Houston, and Chinese Baptist Church, the place where I'm currently at, it's actually the oldest Chinese church here in Houston. It's the first one.
Mhm.
And so I think by the time he came to Houston, it was probably what 20 something years old at that time, and
Mhm.
so 20, 30 years old, and then so he decided to kind of take that position.
Okay. Um, could you describe the home you grew up in, kind of like family structure and culture?
um I mean, I think we were okay, so I don't know what a typical Asian American family is anymore. I just even in our context, I have no clue what that means. For us, we've always grown up in a Christian household, right? My dad has always been a pastor, so that kind of flavored a lot of stuff. Which so I think at the time his position was Chinese associate, and so my dad's characteristic kind of bled over to the rest of the family, and so it was very hospitable. And so his main role was to preach and teach, but he took care of a lot of the, I guess, Chinese exchange students who would come from Hong Kong or China, and they wouldn't have enough money or they couldn't go back for holidays and stuff. And so we just remembered growing up, it was always people at our house. And those, I mean, they're still, really good family friends. They own Oishi. Like we grew up with them, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
And so that's how we grew. We just knew, hey, we're always going to be taking care of people. And that's a good thing. We went on family vacations with them. And so growing up, that was the norm. I don't know if that built any resentment of just kind of our family type of thing, just because, we just knew that that was kind of the mission of the home. And so that kind of really played a part into it. And so, um, I mean, for the most part, my mom taught piano, really supported my dad and a lot of stuff. But again, as far as the hovering and the generational parenting stuff, my parents were on the opposite end where we felt like we had too much freedom, and there's a lot of crazy baggage that came from that. So, just stuff like studying at IHOP at like 3 in the morning when I was like a freshman in high school, stuff like that. It's just ridiculous. In A-Leaf of all places. So
Yeah.
Could you also describe some like holidays and traditions that your family would celebrate?
we celebrated pretty much all of them. I mean, all of the the standard holidays that we did. I mean, July 4th was more with the general church congregation, right? We didn't really have a personal thing until high school where we just kind of went out and shot fireworks and stuff. But I mean, we celebrated probably Easter, Christmas, Thanksgiving. Um, that was a lot of it, right? We didn't really. I don't think my parents knew much about Memorial Day or Labor Day, right?
Mhm.
Just as first gen immigrants, it wasn't really on their radar other than they got the day off. But it was pretty. We followed whatever the news told us to follow. That's pretty much it.
And were any of those holidays and traditions like Chinese
Oh
traditions?
yeah, I mean, Chinese New Year, Mid Autumn Festival,
Mhm.
um, stuff like that, right?
Mhm.
Birth like red egg parties, birthdays, just whatever Chinese tradition you keep. And so we're coming from a Cantonese perspective as well.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Yeah. And were there any important lessons from your childhood that you still remember today?
I'm gonna say yes. I mean, everything from my childhood, it's pretty much imprinted on who I am now. I mean, again, we mentioned hospitality. I think that's always been huge.
Mhm.
Um, Taking care of people. I mean, it's part of hospitality, but really kind of going out of our way to take care of people, right? My dad would typically bring me along on visitations and stuff. And now looking back, obviously, I see the importance of it. And I growing up, I'm just like, it's my dad. You know,
Mhm.
he's broken English. I don't know how he made it through America. There's all these things on him. And now you're just like, oh my God, I don't know how you got a doctorate degree and all this type of stuff. And I'm just like, it makes sense why so many people hold him in such high esteem. And I'm going, it's not because of how smart or how well to do he was. It was just because he invested a bazillion hours in people.
Mhm.
And so try to enforce that onto my family and also to the youth that I work with as well.
Yeah. So was he a pastor like also in Fort Worth and Beaumont? So everywhere he went?
So Fort Worth, he was getting his education. I
I see.
mean, so Beaumont, he was a pastor, and I think he was a pastor at a pretty predominant Caucasian church.
Mhm.
There could have been a Chinese. There's probably a Chinese small little group. I think
Right.
that's why he was hired on. Again, it's like a billion years ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, then come to Houston. So we were, for the most part, within a church thing, we were always most likely first gen Asian American that we're dealing with, or overseas, right?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. And so what school did you go to in Alief Elementary School?
Elementary, I went to Chancellor.
Mhm.
Do you know Chancellor?
No.
Uh, yeah. So Chancellor Elementary, and then I went to Alief Middle School,
Mhm.
which is the tough one.
Yeah.
I've got stories there. And then high school, I was actually there's a drafting system in Alief. And it was at that
Oh.
time it was either Hastings or Elsick. Those are the only two, and both of them had horrible reputations. And so at that time, Kerr High School was actually um, 3 years built, and so my friends and I just decided, hey, we're all gonna apply to go to Kerr High School. So I ended up going to Kerr High School there,
Okay.
and then that was elementary, middle, high school.
Yeah. And so what stories do you have from middle school?
Dude, middle school is rough. Like, you know how they keep talking about like kids getting beat up and
Yeah.
whatever, like that was me. Like, so my friends and I, we got jumped, like, and
Mhm.
it's not the jumped where you got pushed. I mean, like, you don't know where it's coming from and people just knock you out from the back. And so that was really traumatic, 6th and 7th grade.
Mhm.
So do, this is old school. Do you remember the shoe called the Kangaroos? They have
No.
they designed shoes with, and not just for me, by the way. They have these shoes and they have pockets on them, like a zipper or a Velcro, and they actually it's supposed to hold your keys or
Mhm.
your coins or whatever,
Right.
so that like if you're running or something, you don't have to like carry them in your pockets.
Mhm.
Anyways, I bought me a pair so I could keep my lunch money in there. So when I got jumped, they wouldn't steal my money because I'm like, you
Oh,
get jumped and then you lose your money, and that's like double bad.
right.
But man, it was so bad where the gym teacher would, if he saw two people fight, he wouldn't want to get in trouble, right? So he actually
Mhm.
put boxing gloves on the two people, and he would lock you in the office until somebody got out, right? And so
What?
I was like, I have no chance. So I'd rather get beat up there than just, you know.
Right.
So I would always dress out before gym class because it was the locker room that we would get, jumped and
Mhm.
stuff. So and then by my 8th grade year, the school had already implemented drug dogs. They would wand us down as we were walking into the schools. We'd
Right.
have to wear clear backpacks. We'd go through metal detectors.
Mhm.
Um, there would be search raids every week or whatever.
Mhm.
I saw my first stabbing in like
Oh, wow.
next to my locker, introduced to drugs early on in like 6th grade. And then there's a nursery for pregnant teenagers
Mhm.
at our middle school. So,
Mhm.
by the way, this is like early 90s,
Mhm. Mhm.
which
Right.
is insane,
Yeah.
right? So,
Right.
yeah. So my upbringing is very different than the demographic that I'm working with right now
Right.
with teenagers. So,
Yeah. And I guess we can get into that later, but did you, when you and your friends were like jumped, or was that because you guys were like Asian, or was there like a specific reason?
probably. I'm pretty sure we were vulnerable. We looked vulnerable. I mean, we look like small little Asian people.
Mhm.
Um, and it just, I, I think at that time, again, there's no social media. Um, very influenced by prepubescent hormones and stuff, and so
Mhm.
it's just how people coped. There's a lot of gangs in middle school,
Mhm.
so a lot of that was that you just trying to exert your dominance. So I think some of it was racial, some of it was just teenage boys, right?
Right. Mhm.
But it wasn't just the guys. Those harassment, bullying, all of that
Mhm.
stuff was like, that's just, to us, that's just what you go through, and because you are Asian, at that point you're just not, there's not a lot of big Asians playing sports in my middle school at that time. It was maybe like two,
Mhm.
right? And then
Mhm.
the rest of us are just scrawny and stuff. So,
Mhm. Right. And how did you cope with those like experiences?
I mean, fortunately, we were beat up together, so we coped as a group. It wasn't never so bad to where I had anything broken or came home with like bruises or black eyes and stuff.
Mhm.
So we never really told our parents about this stuff. Um, it was just, to us, it was really kind of like, okay, this is what people go through.
Mhm. I see.
We just take our poundings and then we just move on from it. And then by 8th grade, I wised up. I made friends with some of the big guys who were also, nice people. So they protected me, and so we kind of played the game that way as well. So um, by 8th grade, again, I was just, again, it wasn't big, but I knew how to make different friends who
Mhm.
I made sure to kind of cover myself that way. So,
Right.
um, but it's a whole nother strategy for surviving middle school, because I had to make sure that I knew certain people in different groups or
Mhm.
cliques or even gangs to
Mhm.
go, hey, don't mess with him. He's, there's too much heat from his other people. So it was just very, very weird.
Interesting. And
Feels
what
like a
about
soap opera or some kind of weird reality show.
yeah. And what about in high school?
Dude, high school is completely different
Yeah.
because it's so Kerr was like the safe haven. You had to take tests to get in and stuff, and so we didn't have to worry about any of that. So I was like, oh, thank God.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, so Kerr was completely different. It started off as it wasn't a magnet school. It was public, but it was a testing school to where it was a college prep style where
Mhm.
they would give you a syllabus. They would have you a lot of kind of free asynchronistic learning.
Mhm.
And then, so socially, it was really easy for me. So, I jumped in freshman year, made friends with the seniors and everyone else. Our graduating class was 123. So that gives you
Mhm.
a feel of how small the school was.
Mhm.
So by the time I graduated, I've known most of the upperclassmen. I knew most of my senior class, and I still hang out with them today. I still know them, and so it's just high school was very drastically different than middle school
Mhm. Yeah.
for that. Yeah,
Yeah. And were you more like academically focused in high school or a mix of both?
I I think I want to say I was a good mix of both. I
Mhm.
was, so again, we had 123 in our class. I was number 12. I
That's
was like,
pretty
there's no
good.
way, because top 10 was like 12 people.
Right.
Uh, and so it was really hard to fight for the top 5 spot just because, you
Mhm.
can't screw up at all. But they're all my friends anyways. And so the way the school was structured, it was very academically focused. So I don't think that was a pressure whatsoever. I think if anything, it drove us to more competition because we were taking like 10, 11 AP courses by junior, senior year.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and then but then socially it was easy just because like it's so small,
Right.
and the structure of the school was and then it was weird because we went to school from like 9 to 3.
Okay.
We're 9 to 4, so
Hmm.
it's just that changed some of the dynamics too. Because whereas like Clements and Bel Air at that time, they're going from like 7 to 2 or 7 to 3 or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. Makes sense.
So outside of school, what kind of extracurriculars did you take part in?
I got a job. I've been working since I was 12.
Oh.
Obviously, that was like under the table. But I was grading for Kumon, right?
I did
That
that.
was my first. I was getting paid like $1 an hour or something. So my parents cut me off, I think around 14 years old or whatever. And so after working at Kumon, I started to work at Papa's Seafood House as a not a busser, as a host, and then a bar back, and then all this other stuff, and then work for the United States Census, and then did pharmacy for a little bit. So did that during high school, and then was pretty involved in church stuff, camps and youth group and all that type of stuff. And then I think I tried the YLC and then the CACA stuff for a little bit, but never really got into it. So the whole, Miss Chinatown pageant and the whole youth leadership camp conference thing, whatever they had at Rice at that time. So
Nice.
it wasn't much. I was just
Yeah.
working in school, church.
Did your parents ever have an influence on your studies?
I mean, it was never like you got to get A's. I think it was more like just do your best, right? And I don't know if that was because of a pastor's right, pastor's upbringing. I think as long as they're like, look, don't go to jail, don't get a girl pregnant, and we'll be fine, type of stuff. So, I mean, they never really helped me with homework either. It was just kind of like you and me and my sister just kind of figure out what you need. If you need test masters or if you need a tutor, then we'll think about it and stuff like that. So it wasn't kind of, there's no pressure there.
Outside of like work and church, was there anything like more fun and lighthearted that you took part in?
High school or beyond?
Middle school or high school?
Middle school is a blur. I think because of my past testimony, I'm just like, I'm pretty sure I repressed that. I started dating in middle school, extracurricular, but so I dated a girl for 2 years from 8th grade to sophomore year of high school. So that took up a lot of time. And so that was fun. I mean, it was just, dating and hanging out with her friends and stuff like that. Cause she went to Memorial. So it was a whole different crowd than the A-Leaf crowd. She never really hung out with my friends. So, I mean, I did a lot of, I felt like, high school was fun just cause, again, small classes, went bowling a lot. Studying was really, not the studying the actual content, but the studying together was really fun in high school. Again, we would go hang out at Barnes and Nobles or IHOP or House of Pies, Denny's and stuff like that till crazy hours in the morning. Watch a ton of movies together, go to people's houses. That's pretty much a lot of the stuff.
And
crabbing in Galveston.
I know you mentioned before that you keep in contact with like a few of your friends from high school. Would you say that like you're still pretty close?
Yeah, I mean, we were actually right before this call, we were on a group chat talking about how do we plan our 20th high school reunion. Wow. So yeah, I mean, because everyone's all over the place. I mean, I got a friend in New York, I have some in Houston, so we still keep in touch. So it's, after 20 years, right? It's pretty amazing. But yeah, I would say we're fairly close.
Nice.
Every time we get together, typically Christmas or Thanksgiving, we try to meet together somewhere in Houston to have dinner. with everyone's families.
Mm. Mm.
That's really nice.
Yeah.
How was the college application process for you?
The application itself was pretty easy. I didn't. Okay, so I'm not the most studious. My SAT scores were horrendous. I wasn't like the valedictorian or anything, but I
Mhm.
ended up getting accepted to some pretty decent schools in the East Coast, West Coast. Um, but for me, it was kind of like, well, I wanted to do pediatrics. That was the goal. So I was looking at best med schools in America first off. So obviously wanted to go East Coast for some of that stuff, but then I was like, I can't afford it because I think at that time it was like 80, 90 grand a year, something stupid.
Mm. Wow.
I don't know how much I'll pay there, but I was like, looking around, especially in Texas, kind of like, okay, what sets me to a fairly decent path. And at that time, HBU was actually one of the top ranking pre-med programs because they had the best transition rates. And so the reason why I ended up staying at HBU was because they required us to double major, and then I had a pretty decent scholarship to go into it, and then it was close to home, right? So I wouldn't be living on campus. And then I really wanted to stay back because I have a little sister who was just starting high school,
Mhm.
and I knew the people that were going to be around, and just kind of the just the how we grew up. And I was just like, hey, I want to, if I can, I want to be in Houston to kind of shield some of
Mhm.
that. So the process was fairly easy. So
Um, what were some of your other top choices, and did your parents like have an influence or a say on them?
Yeah, they no, they just like, I mean, again, they they did not say that they're
That you
not
want
going to pay for
knows.
me, but for my parents, they're like, hey, we'll support you as much as we can, but our financial situation. I was like, noted. So I'm like, oh, I gotta get a job. So we were looking at Stanford, Princeton, um, Brown, Yale, these type of things, and then just looking at the cost and kind of where I wanted to go. We're like, is undergrad really worth me shelling out that much? Because I was like, there's no way I was going to get that much scholarships to go to those schools. And so after the finances were out of the question, then we were thinking local, and trying to weigh not just the undergrad degree, but then also cost of living, um, you know, these type of things. So
Mhm.
I don't, and I think once I applied to HBU, it was a really quick response, and so I think at that time I was like, I don't. I just withdrew all my applications from all the other schools because I was like, I don't want to pay the fees.
Mhm.
Um, so I was like, let's just commit and then move. Because all my close friends in high school most of them went to UT, some of them went to California, Rice, I think. So
Nice. And what did you major in college?
uh, I I have a degree in biology, and I have one in religious studies.
Nice.
Yeah. And what were some communities that you were part of in college? Were you part of any okay, like on campus clubs or
Okay, so
anything?
I commuted, right? So again,
Right.
I can't be too involved. I pledged a fraternity, I think
Mhm.
freshman year, maybe for like a week, and then I was like, yeah, I'm not doing this.
Mhm.
And then I joined the pre-med society or something, whatever,
Mhm.
I don't even know what it was called. And then I joined VSA, because that's where all my pre-med friends were. And I was like, all right, Vietnamese Student Association. Uh, so I joined maybe three or four. I really just kind of hung out with a lot of the VSA students, just for because we're all studying together anyways. But that was the on-campus stuff.
Mhm. Yeah. And so were you part of any ministry group or were you just still involved in like CBC?
Yeah, not at church. I mean, sorry, not
Yes.
on campus.
Mhm.
At that time, they didn't have a youth pastor at CBC, so me and maybe two or three of my buddies, we just kind of picked up the slack, and
Mm.
that's how I got involved in youth group. Man, it was just kind of like, hey, you're around, why don't you do stuff? And I was like, okay.
Right. And what were some of like the highlights of your college experience? I know like you commuted, but was there anything?
I mean, there's a lot. I mean, highlights as far as like memorable, or highlights that I'm like, oh, this is like life change, like character building,
I
or
guess
both.
both.
So I mean, um, it was. I mean, okay. So on the ministry side, obviously, working at CBC really shaped my. It changed my trajectory for my career, obviously,
Hmm.
because I was going pre med, but somewhere around junior year, um, as I was working more with the youth, I decided I just sat back and I was like, hey, apparently I'm decent at this. I like it. I wish I got paid to do this. And then at that point, that's so that was really formative. Um, but college was where I met a ton of different people, and I really enjoyed that about college. Um, and it was actually spent more time with people outside of the church than I did with those inside, just because of how we studied and stuff. Because I mean, it's just the rigor of pre med
Hmm.
was so massive. So we did a lot of that.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
college is, I thought college was pretty pretty fun. You know, again, it had to revolve around like hanging out while we're studying.
Hmm.
But I had a little core group, and it was pretty fun.
Hmm. Yeah. Are you still friends with them now?
Um, yeah, not really. I'm closer with my high school friends than I am with my undergrad friends. At least the ones on campus.
Hmm. Right.
Right.
And where'd you
So
go after you graduated from HBU?
from undergrad,
Yeah, undergrad.
I went to Southwestern Theological Seminary,
Hmm.
Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary in Fort Worth.
Okay. Yeah.
So I
And
did, yeah.
go ahead.
No, I did the Masters of Divinity there,
Hmm.
and it was actually the first time I've left the home.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I went, I stayed on campus. I opted to go to campus rather than online,
Hmm.
and did that for about 3.5 years. But what was also really life changing was my dad left the church in 2004, and that's when I just graduated undergrad. And so they forced my sister. I mean, I don't blame them, but they really accelerated the maturity rates for my sister and I, because again, we really have no home in Houston anymore. And this is kind of where we built our future, or our life. And my dad and my mom went to Atlanta, Georgia.
Hmm.
Um, so when I decided to go to grad school, it was double hard, just because number one, I'm going by myself and I've never lived by myself. But then number two, I'm not coming back to Houston for, long weekends or holidays, because there's no home anymore.
Hmm.
And so when I did decide to do that, I had to stay with my aunt, stay with some friends and stuff. So it's very, very life changing, the transition between undergrad and grad school.
Hmm. Yeah. And what made you decide to pursue seminary rather than like rock pre-med?
My dad told me I was an idiot and I needed some education. He was
Okay.
like, "Hey, you think you're smart, but you're really stupid. You probably, because I mean, I got offers right out of undergrad to do youth ministry,
Hmm.
and I was like, I could do this, right? Like, just get a book and repeat it." And then he was like, "You'll always have time to do that. Why don't you get a formal training, and your
Hmm.
master's degree will go longer than you think, further than you think." And so my dad really influenced me there. I decided on the seminary I went to because it was a really good mix of theology, but also Christian counseling.
Right.
Um, so I wanted the practical with the academic.
Hmm. Yeah. And what made your dad leave the church?
Drama. I think after 18 years, it wasn't peaceful. I think they got to a point where he was like, I did everything I could, and yet people don't want to change, or it's just the wrong people in power,
Hmm.
and I can't fight this anymore. And so they decided, hey, it's time to go.
And this was at CBC, right?
Is that CBC?
Okay.
Which makes for a funny story because of my return to CBC.
Right. We can talk about that later.
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
and so what'd you do after your seminary?
So after 3.5 years, what's funny was I was offered the position at, so during seminary, I served at Arlington Chinese Church,
Mm,
where I made a lot of good friends there. Um,
I see.
but so they offered me the youth pastor position right after I graduated. But I told them I've already made a commitment to my dad's church to intern there for a year as the
Mm,
English. So because he was like, "Hey, I need your help," and I was like, "Okay, once I'm finished, I'll give you a year." So I told Arlington, I'm like, "Hey, if you can hold off on a year, then I'll come back and I'll take the position." And they said, "No, we can't wait that long." So funny thing is, they gave it to my friend, which is good. Fine. I was like, good for them.
mhm,
So after seminary, I went to Georgia and I
mhm.
did English ministry interim for a year under my dad.
I see. Okay. And so your dad was like the Chinese pastor or English
No,
pastor?
he was the senior.
Okay, cool. Um, and so what kind of made you pursue like the pastoral route?
You mean in ministry
Yeah,
versus like itinerant speaking or
sure.
authorship?
Yeah, sure. Words I don't
uh,
understand, but yes.
well, because so I really wanted to join a NGO, right? Before jumping into ministry, because I just wanted to do the camp stuff or the whatever,
Hmm.
and just a lot of the nonprofit stuff.
Right.
But I think something clicked when I'm just around people, and I talked to Jason about this on a podcast, and I think he said the same thing. He said, for you and I, we're built more to take a small little group of people and move them from point A to point B
Hmm.
versus go to a group, talk there, say some stuff, and then move on while not having any clue what's going to happen to these people afterwards,
Right.
right?
Hmm.
And so for me, I was like, hey, I'd rather invest, plant roots, and really kind of toil with these people for an extended period of time rather than whatever else. And that was kind of the pastoral route, if anything.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what does like me being a pastor mean to you?
Right now in this season, it's just crazy. But it, I think it really means, I mean, by definition, it means shepherding, right?
Hmm.
Taking care of people, um, wanting more for them than they want for themselves at time, risking your relationship and your influence by loving them enough to sometimes call them out on things that's going to kill them.
Right.
So it's a lot of that. Um, I think at the beginning, I thought it was really about organization, structuring, programming, and stuff.
Hmm.
While that is very important for a pastor, the administrative side, but it's really about the person to person,
Hmm.
right? And I would say as a pastor, this is this is the most insane job in the world. I mean, because what you're dealing with isn't just preaching or teaching or doing all this type of stuff. I mean, it's cultural contextualization,
Hmm.
it's counseling, right? I mean, it's you got to be a certified. I mean, you almost have to be a certified counselor. You have to be a theologian and academic, right?
Hmm.
Because you can't just pastor out of your own opinions. I mean, you got to be studied.
Right.
You have to be a student of the culture of where people are at, and so it's like 10 jobs rolled into one with none of the benefits at times and all of the issues
Hmm.
because you're dealing with humans who think that, well, I pay your salary so therefore you serve me. So it's this misunderstood, just a lot, 99% of the times just kind of like, what am I trying to do here?
Hmm. Right.
um right, and if it wasn't for some kind of eternal truth or some kind of grounding, then I'm like, this job is like ridiculous, like no one should ever apply for this kind of mentality.
Right. Yeah. And do you think your father being a pastor influenced your decision to be a pastor?
he so when I told him I was dropping, because I was taking organic too at the moment and biochem,
Hmm.
and I was like, I don't really need this. And so I was like, I'm going to tell him that I'm dropping, because I was so far into bio, I was still going to keep the bio degree, but I was going to tell him, hey, I'm not going to pursue pre-med anymore.
Mm-hmm.
My mom and my dad were like, I think they were just devastated. Like the look on their face that night at dinner, they're just like, oh my God, what do we do wrong? And then I was like, no, no, no. But I think I want to pursue ministry. And they're like, no. Like, so it was like, why are you going to ministry when we want you to go to, to be a doctor?
Right.
Because, and I think a lot of it was, don't, we've gone through the worst of it
Mm-hmm.
as a pastor and a pastor's family, and my mom knew exactly what my future wife was going to have to go through, and they were like, whatever you do, just don't go into ministry. So they counseled me out of it.
I see.
I had to persuade, and by the way, at that time they were still pastoring, so I had to persuade my mom and my dad to allow me to pursue ministry. um, but then obviously they saw that this was beyond their decision and my decision for the most part, and was like, okay, well, you know because they heard the affirmation from other people too,
Mm-hmm.
and it wasn't just me.
Right. Yeah. And so what'd you do after Atlanta, interim pastor?
So after Atlanta, I had already had my master's, and then
Mm-hmm.
two bachelor's degree, a lot of experience. And so churches were calling. I mean, I'd pretty much wherever I wanted to go, I was gonna go.
Mm-hmm.
And my parents were like, well, you kind of owe it to CBC because you're still a member there, and technically they kind of supported you through some financial givings and stuff. And I was like, why would you even bring that up? Like, of all people, why are you telling me to apply there?
Right.
And so I was like, there's no way in the world that I want to go there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, screw it. I'll send my application. And they asked me to, because they also knew that I was finishing. And I was like, and the person who was seeking me out, there's a good family friend. And I was like, look, to be honest, there's no way you can convince me to come back to CBC,
Mm-hmm.
because of the baggage. And then they're like, just apply, and let's just see. And I was like, okay, fine, whatever. And so I applied. They're like, we like it. All right, why don't you go for the next step? And I'm like, okay. And so the next step was salary, and I think they offered me $12,800
Mm-hmm.
starting. And I'm like, hold on, is that like per month, or is that like what's going on there? They're like, no, that'll be like your starting salary. And I'm like, you do realize I have like the credentials. I'm not like a
Right.
12-year-old trying to apply for a job. Because I think at that time I was making more as a part-time as
Yeah.
a pharmacy technician, than, because it was like right above minimum wage.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, what are you guys doing? I'm like, you do realize I don't want to, you know, I don't want to move up in the pastoral ladder. I want to do youth ministry for however long I want. Like, this
Mm-hmm.
salary, I can't have a kid or a wife, and I can't, I'm going to be like living off of people's generosity.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, this is ridiculous. So I'm like, okay, why would I apply? And then they're like, okay, we'll renegotiate your salary and stuff. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, it better be like 10 times more. And then I already had my qualms of going, okay, they're like, let's bring you in for an interview. And I said, okay. And my attitude was, I'm just going to disqualify myself at the interview, because
Mm-hmm.
they're going to ask me questions. I'm going to be as blunt and as honest as possible. And I'm going to be like, look, you guys suck. Like, how you run things is stupid. Like, that
Mm-hmm.
person needs to leave. And I'm just going to be as honest as possible. Like, look, I tried and they don't want me. I'm out. So then I'm like free.
Right.
And then for whatever reason, they're like, oh, hey, good points. I agree with that. And I was like, what the heck? And so I was like, crap, I actually might have to get this job. And
Uh-huh.
so I came in for an interview, and I sat down with the youth group at that time. And I'm like, look, I don't want to be here. Like, I really don't want this job. But if you guys, and I was looking at more like the high schoolers, I was like, hey, if you guys are willing to do this with me, like seriously do this and not play some kind of stupid game, and we're going to like go as hard as possible or whatever.
Mhm.
I mean, it was very like, okay, do or die. You be honest with me. And if you're not into this, I'm not applying. And they're like, yeah, we're in. And I was like, okay, I'll take the lowest paying job that came through my email and I'll take it. And 13 years later, I'm still here.
Yeah, so like you're talking about like your resentment towards CBC because of your dad's experience. How'd you like kind of get over that?
Man, honestly, a lot of it, it really not, I didn't get over it because even when I first started my first couple of years, those people were still around.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so there's so much bitterness going on. And I had to see myself as, I mean, because man, coming in, I was a very kind of, unpolished, very green, kind of like, look, I got the master's degree, right? I got the
Mm-hmm.
experience. All right. I'm on staff now. And I'm like, I'm gonna show you, right? Like, so I was fighting with them like any chance I got. And
Mm-hmm.
I realized, this isn't just hurting me. Like this is hurting the people that are all around and especially the youth. Cause I saw the youth pick up on a lot of this and I'm like, I don't want to be that type of example.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, honestly, I don't know if I've really gotten over it. It is part of my testimony of why I'm here. And I mean, I'm going of all things that makes the gospel to make sense or even the pastor it is because in spite of all this stuff, there's something that supersedes all of this, and it's because of what this means, what the mission looks like, the importance of people and eternity and stuff. Because I mean, like, look, none of this would be worth it. Like, I wouldn't wish this on anybody,
Mm-hmm.
right? It logically doesn't make sense
Right.
to do ministry, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially in 2020. But if and only if there is a transcendent truth that governs all of it, then I'm going, well, then at this point, there's nothing else I would want to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely not fun or easy, but there's a guiding principle that goes above and beyond kind of the baggage and the bitterness and resentment.
Yeah. And so why'd you choose youth ministry rather than like being a normal English pastor?
Good question. Because I mean, I think the average age of youth pastors when I first started was like 18 and a half years old.
Wow.
Right out of high school. I think that was the predominant. And then the tenure of a youth pastor at that time was 3 years across America. But in Asian American churches, it was a year and a half.
Okay.
And so I was like, I'm trying to go against the entire, because I was like 24, 25 when I took the
Mm-hmm.
job. And I'm like, I'm already like, what, 7 years older than the oldest
Mm-hmm.
senior.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, I don't know half the terms you guys are using. Just urban dictionary had all this stuff. And I'm just like, what are you guys talking about? So I
Mm-hmm.
already knew, but the reason why I wanted to stay with youth, partly honestly, was because of my personal youth experience. I think the people did the best they could,
Mm-hmm.
but man, it was just, it was fun, but that was it. Right. And
Right.
I'm like, man, I don't know how I made it out of youth ministry growing up there. So I never wanted the people under my watch to ever have to go through that. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Second thing was I always felt like the youth, not just in churches, but in general, they always get the sloppy seconds from everyone else. Right. Cause there's like the adults, right? Like
Right.
let's take care of the adults. Let's budget for them. Let's program for them. Let's, always cater to them. And I'm just like, but why do you, it's not just the budget and everything, the youth get sloppy seconds, but I'm like the education, the training, because I'm like, no one is well qualified. I'm not, and again, I know there's a lot of people who are doing a good job and they can't do the education and stuff. But I'm just like, why are we giving these teenagers such like second, third level crap?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, it doesn't make any sense. And what really kind of blew my paradigm and understanding was, if you think about this, right, 11 years old to 18 years old, it's the most formative 7 years of
Right.
someone's life. I mean, you're going through puberty, right? Your
Mm-hmm.
prefrontal cortex is starting to really like change and grow, and physiologically is just changing.
Mm-hmm.
But you go through some massive rites of passage, right? You get your license, you start to vote at 18. You start to build out these worldviews of sexuality, of race, of identity.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like, why wouldn't you put the best of the best for youth ministry, right? Or for taking care of teenagers for that matter,
Mhm.
you know? And so then I started to go like, it's not just youth ministry, but it's youth education, right?
Mhm.
It's youth in communities, it's youth social services, it's youth, all of this stuff. And I was just like, I can't neglect this demographic.
Right.
And especially on a church level. But then what was even bigger was if youth ministry was already behind in mass, then the youth ministries in an Asian American church was even worse,
Mhm.
right? Especially for second generation,
Yeah.
because not only were they not given the tools and the things that they need, but it's almost relegated to kind of a babysitting program in a lot of Asian American ministries when we were jumping in, right?
Mhm.
And so I was like, if I can set down some parameters to change a lot of this stuff, then I want to drive that conversation, right? I want to break the mold of the year and a half, and if we can help, not just change the Asian American churches, but Asian American culture in general, but then also youth culture. I'm just like, man,
Mhm.
there's so much potential, but then there's so much neglect in this demographic that's, I'm going, you know, it's almost a shame, right, that we've been kind of blinding ourselves to kind of such a big thing.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, again, you look at social science, the strategy is always the same. You get into the minds of the students, then you win everything, right? You shift culture by changing the worldviews of adolescents,
Mhm.
right? And that is the strategy, right?
Mhm.
And you can take that for complete insanity, or you can take that for really big social changes.
Mhm. Right. And so what were some like differences between Asian American youth culture versus like maybe a predominantly Caucasian church?
Well, I mean, easy thing was resources,
I see. Hmm.
right? So just because of the timeline. So the oldest church in Houston right now is us, some 60 something years old,
Hmm.
right? Most youth groups were what, 75, 100. So they not only have the resources, but
Hmm.
they have the seats at the table. You know what I mean? Like, these are these camps. These are what the ideas that we're doing. And so what made me very aware of this is when I started to take the job at CBC and I would go to these youth conferences and I would look around. I'm like, good Lord, I'm the only Asian American at this
Hmm.
place. There's maybe 3 minorities and like 1,000 Caucasian guys.
Hmm.
And I'm just like, and again, I had nothing against the Caucasian guys, but two things ran through my head. I'm like, number one, I'm going, where are the people who look like me? Right? That
Right.
was my first thought. I was like, how come they're not coming to these things, right? Are they not invited? Did they not know? And what I realized is most of the Chinese churches don't have youth pastors, right? They
Hmm.
got an auntie or an uncle who has the time, maybe likes kids, and they're serving. And I was just like, where the world are all the people who are in their 20s who have to do this? So that was the first one. And then as I getting older, I'm like, dude, half your books that you write for us, I can't contextualize that. I don't have $1 million budget, right? I don't
Right.
have, I don't have a youth building. And
Hmm.
so all of the resources that were geared towards Asian American or geared towards youth stuff, I'm like, dude, that's all monolithic culture that I can't translate to necessarily. Like the principles, maybe. And
Hmm.
again, I have no ill feelings toward that. I'm just going, you know, we need a voice,
Hmm.
right? And again, we need a voice for our people, not so much we need a voice to drown out everyone else, if that makes any sense,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
because I'm
Definitely.
going like, I don't know where the next 20 years is going to look like for the Asian American church.
Right.
And Jason and I talked about kind of, man, what happens after second generation,
Hmm.
you know? Um, and Asian churches have to think through this. So I don't know
Right.
if that answers your original question, though.
No. Yeah. I think so. Um, and so Dr. Chow kind of brought up that in the old days, CBC, since CBC was like the oldest church, it was more like of a community for people, a place for people to like fellowship and stuff. And so back when Jim Crow policies were in place. CBC did like social dances, English lessons, just like to try to attract congregants and just to help them
Yeah.
out. Have there been any things that you've implemented similarly, like specifically for the youth, to attract more youth?
To attract youth,
Yeah, or
um,
help them.
honestly, I'm on the different philosophy.
Mm,
If anything, I'm trying not to do anything on campus as much. And that's more of a theological, philosophical understanding because I'm
mhm,
going, look, to call it a church, right? To call it a what biblical defined church is, it's a group of Christians for the sake of fellowship, right? Christian community, Christian worship, Christian education, and equipping, right? And so I see it as, hey, if we're gonna call ourselves a church, we're gonna do the best we can inside here so that you guys can go out there to go change the world.
mhm,
I don't want, I tell the youth all the time, I'm like, I'm not really looking forward to having you invite your friends to come to the CBC.
mhm,
Like if they come, awesome, right? They're always welcome, whoever they are. But in reality, my job is really to kind of get you to understand your role as a Christian so that you can meet people where they're at outside. Because I'm like, why in the world would they feel comfortable? It's already weird bringing them into a even if they're
right.
even if they are Chinese, right? I'm like, we have three identifiers, right? We're Chinese Baptist and a church, and that's
Mhm,
already three obstacles. And I'm going, why not just cut to the chase and have you go out there? So what we've done is we've done all of our initiatives usually outside of the walls of CBC,
mhm,
and we enjoy that. I mean, the only thing that we kind of do internally is Java Jam,
right.
right? That we've been doing for about 12, 13 years.
Mhm,
Uh, and that's more of kind of like a post camp, but multi-generational kind of hangouts, right?
mhm,
But it's once a year. It's it's fun. I like it. It does a lot of good, but we try to do everything outside. So what we try to do really is get involved with the school systems,
mhm,
talk with the superintendents of the schools that our kids are going to, try to meet with, try to have meetings with the school counselors to go, hey, where can the church partner with you? Because I know that your teachers are busy teaching academics, but in reality, with students, right? What's similar is really dependent on parents,
mhm,
and it's really dependent on a lot of this mental health thing, which again, a counselor, they're overwhelmed with this. And so we say, hey, where can we step in? Where can we do the research for you guys? And so, and then also because we are Chinese, how can we bridge the gap to your Chinese American demographics in
mhm,
your school systems, and their parents and stuff? Like, how can we do that? So, when they get foreign exchange students from China, so Fort Bend does this every year, and we connect them with different Chinese organizations.
mhm.
We're able to kind of do that, not because we're doing it from a church, but we're coming more from a cultural standpoint. So we do a lot of our initiatives outside of the walls, or at least for the youth ministry,
Mhm.
that way.
Yeah. And what have been some other impacts that you or like you and the youth have made on specifically the school systems in Houston?
Um, I mean, easy, like really low hanging fruit has just been just caring for the friends of the students.
Mhm,
So we try to pick some really big campuses: Clements, Bel Air, um, you know, Cinco, I don't know,
mhm,
but Langham Creek. So what we do is we always kind of do some kind of school initiative where we go, hey, members of CBC, we just want to make sure that your friends know that there's a church that takes care of them, right? And that was basic the premise. And the goal was, hey, after school, invite your friends to the nearest Chick-fil-A or Boba or whatever else like that, and we'll pick up the tab. No bait and switch, right? No sign up for something, no give us your email or social security. It
mhm,
was just, hey, I represent this youth group and we just want to take care of you. And if you ever, right? And for us, it was, I didn't even want to be there, right? I just gave my credit card. I'm like, hey, just charge within reason. Um,
right.
and because what I want to do is like, I want to go, hey, that kid, what these things do is it allows my youth to have a a generous face-to-face interaction with their peers. And when their peers ask, hey, why in the world are you guys doing this? Right? Are you all selling something? Like, that's what everyone asked. They're like, okay, so do I need to attend some kind of meeting or something? I'm like, no, 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 it's free. And they're like, wait, what? Like, I don't have to pay? And it, like, they freaks them out because,
Right.
you know, like, apparently no one is generous in high school anymore. Um, but I want my youth to, number one, be the face of generosity, right? And I don't even care if it ties back to the church. I just want them to be the face of generosity. But then also just to go, hey, church isn't as crazy as people make it out to be. They
Mhm.
just seem like normal human beings that care. And I think that's the big thing that we want the youth to do, is to go, look, man, like, I'm not trying to sell some kind of wacky cultic idea. It's just be you. Like, if you're cool, be cool, right? If you're this type of person, then lean into it. But you have a different worldview, and you know, it doesn't mean that you can't still be who you are. It's just, you know. So I just want them to know that. So that's a small initiative with
Mhm.
the schools. And so we always talk with the managers and the operators of the restaurants. Um,
Mhm.
and so we try to work with the schools and the community. So one thing that our youth group does pretty well is we're pretty connected with the food industry of Houston, because
Mhm.
of how we interact. So when Harvey hits, our youth were the first ones to ask managers and bussers and servers if we can collect anything as a church to pool resources so that we can give to you. Because again, we frequent them, we know who they are.
Mhm.
We keep telling our people, hey, keep going to this specific share tea or this House of Pies on Westheimer or whatever, and
Right.
always get to know them so they know who we are, and they know we're not trying to sell anything because we've been doing this for years.
Mhm.
But they also know that we're Christian, and we're not ashamed of talking about it, but we're not going to shove it down your throat either.
Mhm. Right. Yeah, that's awesome. Um, so moving into like more CBC as a whole, do you know much about the history of CBC?
To an extent, yeah, fairly. I mean,
You can just
I
share
know the
with
last 30
me.
years. I mean, the origins of it, it's spotty, but I'll
Hmm.
try my best.
Yeah. Do you want to share?
Like how it began and stuff.
Yeah, I guess like whatever you know about it.
Okay, so
Mhm.
we're the first Chinese church planted from First Baptist Church Houston, right? So
Okay.
I-10 and Wirt, right? So
Hmm.
kind of in front of the marquee and stuff. I-10 and 610, right? First Baptist. And so
Hmm.
they wanted to plant because I think the Asian population was growing, right, in the 60s. And so they wanted to have something for the Asian Americans, right? Especially Asian American immigrants. And
Hmm.
so we were actually back at we were in South Maine.
Oh,
That's where we started first. And
okay.
then I think we bought land where we're at right now, which turned out to be a gold mine because
Yeah.
it's Memorial.
Hmm.
So we bought land at our current location in Memorial, and I mean it really was kind of a beacon for the Asian Americans of Houston. And from CBC, there was a Bible study that launched, and that's where HCC was formed,
Hmm.
right, as a Bible study group, and it was mainly more for like the Mandarin congregation, I believe,
Hmm.
because CBC was predominantly Toisan and Cantonese,
I see.
um, and so I think they wanted to kind of form HCC in that manner. But we have a lot of immigrants from Mississippi, a lot of the
Hmm.
first gen Chinese from Mississippi. So if you ever watch that documentary, I don't know if it was on Netflix, it was on either PBS or something. It was about the Mississippi Delta Asians. Did y'all watch that one?
No.
Like, that's our people.
Oh,
And so we just celebrated. I mean, Houston Chronicle just put a story about the Flying Tigers and our veterans who served in a lot of the world wars.
mm,
Not wait, hold on, they didn't serve in World War One,
just two.
but like the Korean War, these type of things. And so a lot of
Mhm.
our original members, our founding members, were actually, you know, they're really active. and they were the movers and shakers of Houston. And so a lot of our people, really were integral in the medical center in the medical field. Dr. Joyce Fan, she
Mhm.
wrote one of the, one of the major chemistry textbooks, and so she taught there for numerous decades and stuff.
Mhm.
And so we have a lot of so CBC, because it's so old, we have a lot of politicians, right?
Mhm.
City council people. We have a lot of those guys, and so a lot of our grandmas were actually born here in the States.
Mhm.
And so I remember Tina's first story when she came to visit CBC. One of the old grandmas went up the stage, and she had this thick Southern accent, and she was like, "What in the world?" So that's really what CBC has its history. I mean, we're predominantly Cantonese, a lot of
Mhm.
people from Hong Kong, attract a lot of students. Um, but we've kind of cloistered ourselves in that little bubble for so long now. So
Yeah.
um, yeah,
Yeah, because our archive um, contains like
yeah,
Jane
G,
Jane G, and
G,
like Linda Wu, that whole family. And it was only recently that I realized that family's like huge. Like
yeah.
Connor's part of that
So
family, right?
yeah, it's
Huge.
and the thing is, they still have a lot of influence in the Asian American communities because I
Right.
mean, again, they're part of CACA, right?
Hmm.
The whole Miss Chinatown
Hmm. Right.
organizations and stuff like that. The I know they do a lot of family scholarships, so the
Hmm.
G's are huge,
Hmm.
right? That's a big family. The Joes are really big,
Hmm.
the Chans, and there's really, we call them clans at
Right.
CVC because it's not just, it's like hundreds, and
Yeah.
it's just massive.
Hmm. Right. Um, and so CBC is like, a Baptist church. So what does that really mean? And how does it differ from like other denominations?
Good
I
question.
talked to Jason about this. Yeah.
Wait, you asked Jason about CBC and the Baptist denomination?
Yeah, just like what's the difference between HCC being non-denominational,
All right.
CBC
So
being Baptist?
the reason why CBC is Baptist is because of our mother church, First Baptist.
I
Right.
see.
So I mean that's just by legacy. We're under the, so Baptist is a denomination. A lot of it has to do more so with theological secondary issues, right? I think if you look at Presbyterians, Methodists, Baptist, right?
Hmm.
It's pretty similar as far as the theological
Right.
understandings on the big stuff. On the secondary things, more the nuanced things, they kind of start to disagree.
Mm.
The difference with Baptist from everyone else is it's actually the autonomy of the local church. So we are not, there's no governing body that oversees a Baptist church. So we are completely autonomous. So we're not like the Methodists, to where if the synod or the councils decide, hey, we're going to close down this church, then the church is gone, right? There's
Mm.
no, the people can't have a say. So we're completely self-governing, and that was one of the hallmarks of it. Um,
Mhm.
Historically, the reason why we're called Southern Baptists really is over the issue of slavery, and
Mm.
so that's a huge stain on our denomination, and it was openly repudiated many a times, but formally, I think within the last 20 years, a lot of the conventional leaders really kind of stood up and kind of denounced, not only apologized, but denounced the whole, slavery history, but then racism and all these type of things as well.
Mhm.
And so a lot of people who don't know the difference between a Baptist and whatever non-denominational, that's usually really jarring news, especially youth. They're like, wait, what? Like, why we're Southern Baptist because of slavery? And I'm like, it's part of our history. So yeah.
Yeah. So what is that history exactly?
So it broke off into clergy
Mhm.
owning slaves, and a lot of the Southern pastors and congregants, it's a lot of it was theological too,
Mhm.
right? They weren't abu- some of them really kind of took the Bible and just went crazy town. But those who really believed that they were doing a right job, it was a theological thing too. It was kind of like, well, we see this. There's no straight prohibitions against slavery, right? Because they're like, well, how do we justify certain letters and stuff?
Mhm.
And they were thinking economics as well, obviously.
Mhm.
Whereas the Northern Baptist, they were pushing down. They're like, hey, look, it was not a condoned thing to have. It was permissible at that time, but with massive regulations, which was very different. And so this is where I guess definitely during the Civil War, this was hugely debated and even debated within denominations and stuff. So, but again, like I said, the Southern Baptist Convention eventually came around to kind of say, "Hey, we were wrong.
Mhm.
This is
Right.
definitely not right," and they repudiated the whole thing.
Yeah. And so do you think the Chinese aspect of like CBC influenced the meaning of Baptist for the church at all? Or
No,
not really? Yeah.
honestly, I mean, I think if you ask 99% of them, they have no clue what a Baptist is. So the caricatures, the misnomers, they're going to be
Mhm.
like, well, we baptize by immersion, which I'm like, okay, you're not wrong. You don't dance, you don't drink, you don't smoke or whatever. And I'm just like, where did you guys get that? And I'm like,
Right.
so it's all these caricatures of what a Baptist is. And I'm like, yeah, I've already broken half of those, so
Mhm.
again, it's when you're talking about Baptist denominations, it's more of the polity and
Mhm.
small theological differences.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Um, and so how large is the congregation, the English congregation in Mandarin slash Cantonese?
On roll or in reality?
In reality?
Okay. Pre-COVID, I would say English congregation was about 150 to 200 people.
Mhm.
Mandarin was about 30.
Mhm.
Cantonese was about 30, 40.
Mhm. Yeah.
On
And is
on
there
on paper, English is about 450, 500 members, and
uh-huh.
then Cantonese and Mandarin sit about what, 150, 200 or something like that.
Interesting. Is there
So
also a Russian congregation?
there was a Russian congregation
Okay.
that was part of us, and
Mhm.
that they are no longer there.
Oh,
We have a Thai church that meets at CBC, but they're not officially part of our membership.
I see. And how did that Russian congregation start? And why did they leave?
Good question. I don't know. I'm not privy to a lot of that information.
Mhm.
It was, I believe it was initiative from our senior pastor at that time,
Like,
and he had close connections to Ukraine and Russia. And I think one of his friends was asked to kind of, hey, can we meet here? And I think they did some kind of agreements. And then I I'm not very clear on why they left in that
mhm.
type of thing. So
Yeah. Pastor, is it Pastor Oleg?
Oleg,
Oleg, okay. He's from like, isn't he from Kazakhstan?
Kazakhstan.
Kazakhstan or something?
Yeah,
So he came here. What is he English side or Mandarin?
he is. His title is pastor of college and young adults.
Oh, I see. Okay, cool. I heard he was like he went to the church that HCC planted in Kazakhstan.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Um,
pretty crazy.
it's pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so are there any other like ethnic groups that CBC kind of attracts?
You mean inside the congregation?
Yeah,
Um,
like maybe non-Asian or other
we, we,
types of
we, we
Asian.
there's so at this current moment, right? There's no
Hmm.
strategic plan to attract any specific
Right.
group, and I would
Hmm.
even say Asians. At least the English congregation, we're just like, hey, we're just kind of going about it, and so
Hmm.
there's really no definite strategies for specific target audience. It's just kind of hey, if you want to show up, show up. Obviously, the Mandarin and the Cantonese are more flavored towards their congregation, so you know.
Right.
But in Houston, I think it's us and Southwest CBC that are the Cantonese dominant churches,
I see.
whereas everyone else is Mandarin.
Yeah. Um, and so like kind of speaking on all the Asian churches in America or in Houston, are the congregations more like self-selected on which church they specifically go to, do you think? Or
You mean in Houston,
yeah,
like whether what church they want to attend?
right, yeah. So specifically like Asian Americans. So do you think one church caters more to like ABCs, Taiwan?
Yeah, I mean that's such a hard question right now. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I think the benefit of where HCC is located is because they're so close to the medical center, and I think that was strategic, right?
Right.
So obviously they draw from the schools there, right? So
Mm-hmm.
Rice, the Med Center, St. Thomas, even I don't know, but just geographically, and then Fort Bend obviously attracts all Sugar Land, and they're the largest Chinese church. They're actually they're considered I think they're considered a mega church,
Really?
with more than 2,000 people. Um,
Hmm.
and so most of the other ones are location driven. So Katy Christian Community Church is obviously geared towards Katy. Um, the North Houston one caters to Spring and the Woodlands and Humble, but churches like West Houston Chinese Church and CBC um,
Mm-hmm.
were more so commuter churches, and people are coming from all over the city, and
Right.
that's typically because of family or friends
Mm-hmm.
that draw them there. Um, and I think the unique thing with CBC is we are the only church that is English ministry dominant. Like
Mm-hmm.
our
Yeah.
biggest congregation is English
Yeah, that makes sense. Um, and
because
so,
we've been here so long.
right, yeah. And kind of along those lines, the English congregation has grown so large, but how has that affected CBC's initial mission, I guess? Or
Yeah,
maybe it didn't affect at all.
that's a good question. I mean, at this current moment, I mean, I don't. It's not a secret. I think we're trying to figure out what that is actually.
Mm-hmm.
And so, obviously, the Christian mission has always been the same,
Right.
but the goals and the trajectory of CBC, I think that's currently in progress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what do you think CBC will look like in the future in terms of like congregation
Good question.
demographics?
To be very honest, I think if we don't start asking really hard questions right now, in my personal opinion, and I'm at the moment I'm the most tenured on staff, which
Mm-hmm.
is odd, right? Being the youth pastor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, but my honest assessment is if we don't start asking some really, really hard questions about who we are,
Right.
who's our target audience, how we're going to for multiple generations, without those questions being asked and answered relatively soon, I think CBC has a timeline.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like,
And do you see, oh,
yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
no, I'm saying these are things where I think every ethnic church has to be able to do
Yeah.
20 years, every 20 years, because the culture is changing so quickly, and you can't just assume, well, my kids will come back, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The kids coming back from college are coming back, and I'm going like, we of all things we see the opposite trend, right? They're
Mm-hmm.
not coming back, and that's a huge issue because our demographic are the boomers at this point,
Mm-hmm.
and they're, again, I mean, like just by sheer age, they have 20 years left,
Mm-hmm.
and so if you don't start thinking about Gen X and millennials, then you are setting yourself up for failure.
Right. And do you see like personally, do you see the Asian American aspect of CBC kind of decaying over
Oh yeah.
time? Right.
You
Yeah.
mean the Asian American identity, or the Asian American people going to CBC?
I guess not necessarily, yeah, I guess more like identity and that kind of like flavor that was there in the beginning.
Uh, it, To answer that, I would actually say no, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's as obvious, right? Or it's as explicit to be like, oh, hey, we're going here because we're Asian American,
Mm-hmm.
right?
I see.
I think the newer generations, especially millennials, Gen Zs, hopefully, they're going to this church because of what the church stands for,
Mm-hmm.
more so than the Asian Americanness of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I, I'm of the opinion that like, hey, I don't think you need to be ashamed of being Asian American. I think there are definite, advantages, especially towards missions and contextualizations and stuff. That's, hey, we are who we are for a reason,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not our first identifier. Um, but again, you're gonna have very different generational conversations with that,
Right.
depending on who you ask.
Yeah. And so does CBC engage in any like church planting initiatives?
Man, good question. Explicitly, no.
I see.
Um, Partnering, I would say yeah. I mean, Costa Rica,
Mm-hmm.
that was part of a church planting effort, and
Okay.
it's still ongoing with
Mm-hmm.
Luis and LA Ranch. So there's small efforts here and there. It's not strategic.
Mm-hmm. Right. And how did CBC come to partner up with like HCC, FBCC? Because they all were kind of like planted by HCC.
Yeah.
Right.
Um, it depends. I think depending on who's on staff is that person decides how tied they are with other churches. So
Mm-hmm.
my again, philosophy of ministry is for the youth ministry. The moment I showed up was I wanted to do a monthly visitation with the rest of the Asian American youth pastors in Houston
Mm-hmm.
because we do camp together, but also
Right.
because our people know each other. So we want to make sure that we're sharing resources and stuff. Um, but then also I drew a circle around CVC on Google and I was like, all right, find me all the churches within a 5 mile radius or 10 mile
Mm-hmm.
radius. And I say, hey, I want to know what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to partner with them. Um, and then I go, hey, where are my largest constituents of students, right? It's Sugarland, Sci-Fair. And so I'm going, okay, what churches are their friends going to?
Mm-hmm.
So start to reach out to their youth pastors to be like, hey, what do you guys see over there? What's happening over there? How y'all dealing with prom and all this type of stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
it depends on the person
Right.
on how much and how close they are tied with all the other churches.
Yeah. And do you have any connections with like Korean churches?
Yeah,
The ones
yeah.
in
I mean, it's so Pete Chung of KCPC and Katie.
Mhm.
We try to meet up every once in a while, and we do that. Soul Baptist or New Life up in Cyfair.
Mhm.
We connected quite a bit because the youth pastor there was my wedding officiant and my mentor.
Fun.
But he left not too long ago, so I haven't really caught up with them. The Korean churches are a little bit different than the Chinese churches
Mhm.
um, in terms of networking, right? Specifically, and we've talked about this with Pete, and we're just like, hey, we need to do better
Mm.
partnering with Asian American churches.
Right. Yeah. And are you part of PACT?
I or CBC. I mean,
That's you.
so we I used to. The only reason why I'm not is just because of timing, right?
Mhm.
It's just where CBC's at is just we don't have resources to devote to it. But
Right.
again, I've been to some pack meetings. I do render. I do all that type of stuff. So I mean I want to be in conversation with Jason and those guys on Pact,
Mhm.
but also extend that to California and to Boston, to
Right.
Chicago. Just really connecting with Asian churches all around the U.S.
Yeah. And going kind of back to youth ministry, what's your like main vision for youth ministry at
Ah,
CBC?
good question. Like fucking dream.
Yeah, like a
Oh,
dream.
okay, like a dream. Okay, so here's my I call this my golden unicorn. All right. So my dream, this is a crazy dream, is what if, right? What if I get a kid and their parents starting 6th grade? Okay. Like they jump in and they're bought in. They're just like, whatever you want to do, let's just do it. All
Mhm.
right. So that's already a big what if. What if I get a kid from 6th grade and we train them all the way to junior year? Okay. Like, I mean, and train them theology, doctrine, leadership, counseling, So a well-rounded worldview with all of the tool. And again, this is what adolescence is, to allow them to go into independence so they can flourish as a individual, right? So
Right.
what if we did that within a Christian worldview, 6th to junior year, along with their parents? By senior year, start to pray and identify what are some colleges around the world that have zero to little no Christian influence on their college campus, right? What if, like, and so we're like, hey, there's a place in Brussels, right? Or there's a place in middle of Ohio or Wisconsin, right? They have nothing. There's like 1,000 people on their college campus. And I go, what if that senior is mature enough to go, hey, I'm going to get my degree, right, in engineering or accounting or teaching or whatever, right, or psychology, but I'm going to be the Christian presence on that campus. And what I would love to do is to have 4 or 5 youth ministries who are thinking this way and go, oh, sorry, my battery just went nuts. Sorry. What if my student connected with 4 or 5 other youth groups and said, okay, there's a college in the middle of Wisconsin and we are going to apply there together, right? The 5, 6 of us, and we're going to be purposeful day one when we jump into campus, right? As a Christian presence. I'm like, mind blowing. Because I'm like, everyone wants to do missions, right? Like overseas missions. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I'm like, why not double it up? Because you're still getting the college education, but now you have a purpose on campus. And I'm not saying people who go to campus don't have a purpose, but I'm going like, man, like UT, there's a gazillion of really good Christian ministries there, right? A&M, right? UH, Rice, like there's tons of it. But I'm going like, if I can get a kid to start really thinking about the gravity of what they're buying into with this faith, then man, why do they have to wait till they're 20 something or 30 something to start doing something real with their faith? I'm going, it's already a natural progression to go to college campuses anyways, or to go to college for most kids. Why not put down a eternal and a significant
22 hours
weight on this? You know what I mean? So that's my golden unicorn. It's a hard sell. It's because, and I told my church, I'm going, hey, as long as you have me on staff, that's what I'm really driving for. And so I've already started to talk to this 5th grade parents to be like, hey, this is what if your kid is coming into the youth group, this is what all of the programming is supposed to lead them to this golden unicorn. So we're kind of on year 3 of taking it seriously.
I see. And so like what have been like sort of specific programs that
So I mean, yeah. So if the goal is to send them out, then I'm going, okay, what age range should I start thinking about stuff?
Right.
So theologically, small building blocks as a middle schooler, developmental stuff more as a sophomore, junior, leadership principles in high school, counseling techniques in high school, upperclassmen type of years, right? Building the heart for this stuff, probably 8th grade, 9th grade type of thing. Social development, right? Personal and intrapersonal connections and holding conversations. That is 6th grade, man. I'm trying to get that person, because I'm like, you can't lead a small group unless you can actually hold a conversation. And so we're trying to train a lot of our Gen Z middle schoolers to talk, right? And so, I mean, it's a lot of deconstruction early, and then trying to reconstruct that. Again, it's pretty difficult, right? But again, when I first started, the pattern for youth ministry was entertain my kids, teach them a couple good moral lessons, and make sure nothing's set on fire, and you've done your job. And I'm like, you don't need any type of training to do that, right? And I'm like, and I think it's insulting to students too, right? To give them 2nd grade, 3rd grade Sunday school or some kind of 2nd grade stuff while they're taking AP US history and calculus. And I'm like, but you're feeding them like 2nd grade material. Come on, like that I'd be insulted. And so So I vowed to change how youth ministry was ran for at least whatever I can handle.
Yeah. And so how have you like what have been some of your strategies to create an environment where the youth at CVC can socialize among each other and create like lasting relationships outside of church?
Well, that's that's a little bit more difficult because I tell them, I'm like, look, just because you're part of the youth group, I don't expect you guys to be best friends,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to kill this misnomer that like, hey, you're part of a youth group, you guys all got to know each other and make these relationships, and hopefully they do, right? Because I'm doing a wedding for two of my youth who met in youth group, right? I'm doing their wedding next 2 weeks from now,
Romantic.
um, and that happens. But I'm just going like, hey, biblical community isn't about a group of people who look like you, think like you, act like you, and it's around your same age. That's not community.
Mm-hmm.
Community in a church is those who are centered around the gospel.
Right.
And you should, because what happens is they drop out and they don't want to find a church post college because it doesn't mimic what they experienced in college, right? And I'm going like their definition for community is people who have been around for 24/7 and we've just small grouped it up. And I'm like, well, that doesn't really happen inside of a generational church.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we've tried to do as a strategy to prevent that, number one is really to kind of do church membership, to help them understand what biblical church membership is. And
Mm-hmm.
then number two, surround them with adults, right?
Yeah.
Have grandparents who serve with the youth ministry, that type of stuff. Because I'm like, they don't want their parents in, but I'm like, you need them.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't handle talking to an adult, then I'm like, you're screwed for interviews, right? Like
Right. Yeah.
you're it's ignorance pooling ignorance when everyone around you is 1 year apart from you and they all agree with you, right? Let's just there's no growth in that.
Right.
So we force the issue. We try to at least.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. Um, and I guess speaking more on like COVID, how has that impacted the youth? Yeah.
Man, it sucks.
Mhm.
I mean, taking this generation of again, and you got to think of when COVID hit.
Yeah.
You had George Floyd. You had some massive Supreme Court cases.
Mm-hmm.
You have such a you have a lot of mental health issues on the rise, and it's not just on the rise, but it was made more evident and obvious
Mm-hmm.
these last couple of years. And so COVID hit almost at the perfect storm, right?
Right.
When all of these issues were happening, COVID shows up and pretty much forces people to face kind of their worst fears.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were dealing with that by really making sure that our people were checked up on, And so luckily we built out the structure to where we had we had oversight for every single youth in our youth group.
Mm-hmm.
So at any moment I can be like, hey, what's so and so doing and how are they mentally doing or how are they physically doing
Mm-hmm.
or what do they need? And so we had structures built out for that. In that case it was good. I think for the most parts, maybe a third of them enjoyed COVID just because they were more introverted
Mm-hmm.
and they thrived by being independent.
Mm-hmm.
The other third, they adapted, right? They're just
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, look, this sucks and it's inconvenient, but I can get through it. I think they're more antsy and anxious about that.
Mm-hmm.
Another third is really that's the one I'm worried about. Um, they got a lot of their social stimulation from a break from an abusive household.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they didn't have the processing or even the guardrails
Right.
of thinking and pulling them out of depression and anxiety without school and stuff. And so those were the ones that we worried about the most when this whole thing happened. And also we knew that there's a about 40% of our youth that we knew that we were going to lose connections because of the
Mm-hmm.
trajectory prior to COVID,
I
where
see.
we're seeing you very sporadically. And then all of a sudden COVID just pushed them over the edge and we're like,
Right.
we can't even get a hold of them anymore.
Right. Yeah. And what about in terms of like spiritual health? I don't know if you like have any observations, but what are you like most worried about there?
No, I mean, I've been telling parents, and I've been telling other youth pastors, I'm like, this is really a front row seat of how your kid's going to do spiritually in college,
Mm,
right? When no one's forcing them to spiritually grow, um, how are they going to do it, right? And so I try to identify, well, those who call themselves Christian, those are the ones who are going to have to own it first, right? And I'm like, honestly, it's 50%, right, are going to maybe continue.
mhm,
The other 50% is most likely going to fizzle out into nominalism,
mhm,
right? Um, so this was just a litmus test. I mean, we kind of saw the writing on the wall, and we realized, this is not going to scare us. This is just going to reveal what's always been there.
mhm.
And now we're just like, parents, man, it's not our, like, you can't blame us anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that was a huge revelation for a lot of parents. They're like, hey, my kid's not growing, and I'm like, dude, you're at home with them, like, help them,
Right.
because
Mhm,
that's a huge Asian American parents. That was a kick in the pants for them, because
mhm,
they're realizing, I don't know how to talk to my kids,
mhm,
right? I don't know how my kid is feeling. I don't know how to disciple my kid. And I'm just like, because they leaned on the church and the youth leaders so much that they don't know how to do this. And I'm like, hey, we've been trying to give you the tools, but now like, we can't do much more than virtual stuff every once in a while.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I guess moving away from CBC and going into your podcast with the other
With
youth.
my 100 subscribers, yeah, we're blowing and going.
So, what is your podcast? You can tell the
Is
audience.
is this a plug?
Yeah, yeah.
All right, nice. So we are called Collab Houston. Look us up. Very popular. Um, honestly, we've been meeting as a group of youth pastors for the Asian churches for the last 10 years, 10, 11
Mhm.
years. And this was a survival tactic more so than a strategy, because we were like, we're dying here. We need to meet up once a month, and we just need
Right.
a place to vent, right? It's like, we would meet at Hong Kong Cafe in Chinatown, and
Mhm.
we would just, a lot of it was like, dear God, how are you surviving? Don't quit yet. Who's dating who in whose youth group? It's homecoming season. Why is my boy asking like four of your girls out? And so it's just, it's real. Like, this is what we actually do. So
Right.
we've been always saying, hey, we should record our conversations. And for a lot of it was record, and we're like, I don't care if no one watches. I want to record this so that at least I have a reference point of what I was thinking on this topic, right?
Mhm.
Or this type of thing. Because for me, it was mainly to go, man, if another Asian American youth pastor started today, right? I
Mhm.
don't want them to start from scratch,
Mhm.
because, like, inevitably, like, it's just the stats are against them. And I'm like, I'm trying to build that guy up or that girl up as best as I can. And if they have the resources that we've already built out, then that's for them. So that's what Collab Houston really lays down. We really want to start hitting a lot of issues like the future of the Asian American church,
Mhm.
cross generational parenting.
Mhm.
How does that work, right? Dealing with mental health, working
Right.
with sexuality inside the Asian American church. All of these topics is,
Mhm.
we want, like, we think, okay, well, we have the experience and we have kind of the research. So how can we say this on a Asian American youth ministries level? Because there's nothing like this out there.
Mhm. Right. Yeah. And so, what youth pastors do you partner with? What churches?
All of them. All of them. So, I mean, there's Katy, HGC, Fort Bend, um, CLCC, Clear Lake Chinese Church. Um, we do West Houston Vietnamese Church at times.
Mhm.
So it's just, it's honestly, it's just us friends. It's just people that we've grown up with, right? So
Yeah. And so, do you guys do anything else other than podcasts or recording yourselves?
we uh, we do camps. We do trainings together at times.
I see. Uh-huh.
Yeah, we try to pull resources to do not ecumenical, but we do more kind of conferences together and trainings, just so that it's not just one group. But
Mhm.
what we've trying to do when it's a normal year is we try to calendar plan to where we go, hey, CBC is going to partner with HCC this month.
Mhm.
HCC is going to partner with West Houston, or West Houston is going to partner with Katy this other month. So we're always trying to intermingle our students so
Right.
that they're not just siloed in their own little bubble.
Right. And so when did like Collab Houston formally start? Were you guys always called Collab Houston, or was that just kind of like,
We're pretty new, man. I think it's happened during quarantine.
right? Yeah,
So,
I see. And speaking about camp, do you want to speak about discovery and impact? So
so
how did those
yeah.
start? Yeah.
So Discovery and Impact was an initiative made by Houston Chinese Church and West Houston Chinese Church like 20 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
something like that. No, more than 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And the goal was to have a Christian camp, a church camp for the Chinese churches. And the reason why was mainly because of demographics and
Right.
because of finances, right? We charge way less than most youth camps
Mm-hmm.
across the spread. And so they started there. It served a lot of people. Our Discovery Camp is our middle school camp, and we serve the incoming sixth graders all the way to the outgoing eighth graders, and then Impact is ninth graders to graduating seniors.
Mm-hmm.
We rely heavily on counselors, and a lot of them are college students um, who come back and feel like youth are important and they want to serve students.
Right.
And so we have camp typically at the end of July or the beginning of August. But for us, the reason why we CBC that we partner with this is really to kind of pull together kind of this ethnic identity,
Mm-hmm.
but also Christian identity once a year, and go, hey, we can learn and we can fellowship and we can kind of get to know each other, so that it's a once a year type of thing where you can see your other churches and stuff together.
Right. Yeah. And so how have you seen these camps change throughout your time as youth pastor?
I mean, philosophy, we tweak programming all the time. We always start with vision. What's the purpose? We have, and we're trying to balance the content, but then also the fun, right? We talk about needs of certain years, right? So again, if the hot topic right now or what everyone's going through is sexuality or mental health, suicide, depression, these type of things, then we try to highlight it more, give more um, airspace to that.
Right.
um, so it really depends. I mean, every year is a little bit different, but under my watch, we're trying to go, you know we want content to be as best as we can make it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because now we're held accountable for the quality of the content, and so we want to
Right.
make sure that it's there.
Yeah. And how have you seen these camps influence students? Because they do go for like 7 years of their life.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, for a lot of students, this is a breath of fresh air, just because like, school's been hard, right? They may not be a social butterfly at their schools,
Mm-hmm.
and it gives them something. And all summer, most of our kids are in camps, other camps. They're studying their summer school, they're working and stuff, and this is a chance for them just to be a kid again.
Right.
And really not, and for a lot of the kids, and they are active in churches and they're serving, but that gives them a chance to kind of just be a student, right? Be fed.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a really good time where they can kind of exhale.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I would also say, even be inspired by the college and adult counselors, to go, hey, I can't talk to my parents at my house. I don't feel like I have no one at church I can really open up to, but you're a camp counselor. I don't really know you, but I got some really big baggage that I need to kind of walk through. And camp is, sometimes for some of these kids, it's once a year, kind of a
Mm-hmm.
lifeline.
Right. Yeah. And how has like um, directing the camps, going through the process, and being at the camp for you influence your life or yourself?
And it's now, I'm married with two kids, and
Mm-hmm.
so it's like, and plus there's a stretch where I had to go through my doctoral classes, um, doing camp. And so it's just, it gets physically, it gets harder as I get older,
Mhm.
right? I mean, I love camp. I love the purpose of camp, but just physically, I, it's hard, man. Like my
Right.
back hurts. Like I can't do some of the games. I'm just like, I'm getting old.
Yeah.
So, and again, I think every youth pastor has that crisis of going like,
Mhm.
hey, is it my time? Am I aging out of this? And so
Yeah.
for me, it's almost existential sometimes. But honestly, for me, the reason why I personally love camp is because it puts me on the ground with my kids, right? Because throughout the year, I'm leading, I'm teaching, it's very high level.
Right.
Um, but at camp, they get to see Justin as the goofy one. Like, oh, he can still have fun with us. Oh, he's semi-athletic, right? Like he can run. Like,
Uh-huh.
he can hang out with us. He can make jokes, and he actually cares about other people, right? Like other churches, like
Mhm.
like so. It's also for me kind of to go, hey, we have a pretty good reputation with all the other churches, and
Mhm.
so and it's not just about me, but even our CBC counselors is like, hey, don't take advantage of who you guys have back at home, right?
Right.
And I think it's another lesson of going, hey, just you guys have a lot of good stuff going on at church, but you can't see it because it's expected. It's part of your routine. But when
Mhm.
you get outside of that bubble, you're like, oh, okay, our people aren't so bad, right? Like,
Mhm.
that
Right.
type of stuff.
Yeah, I think after emceeing for 3 days, I felt that pain. I felt like I
Good
needed to
stuff, man.
retire.
For
Yeah.
real, man.
Um,
Yeah.
so I guess like what have been some key factors that help you construct your own identity and not only just ethnic identity or spiritual identity, but just like who you identify as?
I mean, obviously, past experiences always lead into that. I
Mhm.
mean, I'm a product of my successes, my failures, but also my mentors.
Mhm.
So that's a key thing. Like to me, at the end of the day, I want to enjoy life, right? I want to. I'm the type that's like, hey, you give me something to do. I want to do the best I can. And for me, I'm just like, hey, I want to be, a good neighbor, right?
Mhm.
I want to have fun. I want to eat good food. I want to do the things that like, hey, I just enjoy doing. And so,
Right.
you know, um, and what I want to teach the youth is me at church should be the same as me eating at Chinatown or me going to the movies. Like, hopefully, I'm not any different where, like, no matter where you see me, it's just, I may wear different clothes, but, who I am, my personality, how I talk to you, I'm just the same. So if I'm talking to a 40 something year old, I'm saying the same stuff, right?
Mhm.
So, I want to keep a good pulse on culture. I want to be a student of culture,
Mhm.
um, mainly for myself, right? Just to be informed, but also for the students. Like I have to know a lot of different cultural markers,
Mhm.
and I need to be a student. So I'm always studying, and so I'm back in school again. Um, so
Right.
I know that there's aspects even of my own life and my ministry where it's very incomplete, and I could have stopped a long time ago, but I just know that I have to keep learning.
Mhm.
So whether that's edX courses or Coursera, right?
Mhm.
uh, or whatever, or going back to get a formal degree, I just need to make sure that I'm always learning somehow, and reading people I disagree with, for sure.
Mhm.
And having a lot of those, and really connecting with people outside of my sphere and
Mhm.
my own ethnicity. I think that to me, that's huge,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And again, I don't want to, again, and hopefully if my youth hear this, like they can see this, it's just like, hey, like I'm meeting people because they're people. I'm not doing this because I'm trying to virtue signaling, and so
Right.
it's
Yeah.
just part of who I am. I just don't, that's I never want to be accused of virtue signaling.
Mhm.
um and because I'm like, that's just, if I'm talking to these people, I'm talking to these people. I'm not, they're my friends.
Yeah.
And so, and whether they're Christian or not.
Mhm. Right. Yeah.
So focusing on your personal life a bit more, you You mentioned you were married with 2 kids. Would you say that parenthood had changed your identity?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Marriage is the fast track to growth or maturity. And then you throw in 2 kids and you're just like, yeah, no, I don't know what I'm doing. Because my kids are, so we got married later in life, whatever that means. We got married when we were 30. And so we knew that we wanted to have kids as soon as possible, right? Because we were pretty independent and we're both very alpha in our personality profiles. So, we live very independently, and then putting us together, put 2 alphas together in the same household, it makes for very fun, easy decision making, but then it could just, it could go nuts. And then our first child, Ella, it was 2 years after we were married, and then Mia was 18 months after Ella. So we never really had a time to breathe between Ella and Mia, and it's almost like reading the manual as you're having the product. Not saying my kids are products, but So yes, parenting changes everything, especially how I pastor. Like, I am way more sympathetic to parents than I am 5 years ago.
Right.
So
What are some parenting goals that you set for yourself?
for myself,
Mm-hmm.
same thing I was saying earlier. I just like, I want my kids to really enjoy life, right? Like really, really enjoy in to who they are, who they're gonna be, and to have really good, fun experiences that I don't have to manufacture, but that I can kind of usher them into. So it's like, I can't wait for the days where I can take my kids to the youth's like stuff, right? Like cheer them on like a baseball game or a soccer game or whatever else like that. Bring them to mission trips. And these are like the perks of the job that I can't wait to allow because again, I experience things because of my profession that no other people get to do. You know what I mean? And I'm like, I can't wait for my kids to enjoy some of that stuff. And so it's so hard being a pastor's kid, but it comes with so much, like, they're going to be so scrutinized by so many people. That's not their fault. It's just because of who dad is, but they're going to be loved by more people than most kids get to, just because of where I'm at.
Yeah.
And so already we've just seen, like, Ella's going to turn 6, and I'm like, she has so many people loving her and taking care of her, and she has so many aunties and uncles, and like so I'm trying to train my youth to see me as a legitimate dad, but also for them to love my kids, because I'm like, hey, you're not just my youth, you're setting the stage for my kids, and I need you to be the most mature version of you, because I need you to take care of my kids. Like, that's I'm training you up to do that too. So I can't wait for, like, that's like, those are fun.
Yeah.
I worry, right, as a dad of 2 girls, obviously, because I know the idiots like myself who are out there in teenage adolescent world. And so that terrifies me to no end, especially growing up in this day and age. But I'm like, I can't wait to talk to her about dating and all of the experience that I've had as a youth pastor. I'm just like, I can't wait to, I obviously know it's going to be different with my own kids, right? But I can't wait to start I get to disciple 2 girls, and it's my job and my privilege to really invest all of my knowledge, all of my experience, to pour into these 2 little human beings. And they get the front row seat to all of that. So that gets me really excited.
Nice. Did you and your wife have any like different aspirations for your children, or were you pretty much like united?
I mean, they're 5 and 4, so at this point it's like, stay alive, right? Flush toilets. So our aspirations are like, hey, just don't kill yourself at this moment. We're pretty similar as far as styles of going, like, let's see what they want to do, right? Kind of expose them to everything, and hey, you decide, right? So if you want to play the ukulele, then that's fine. Then, and if you want to, I mean, we joke, we have our kind of our personal goals. I want their instruments to be a guitar because it's cheap and portable. Um, Plus it's more long, not saying piano and violin are not long lasting, but it's more versatile down the road than anything. So I want them to do guitar. For their fine arts, I would like them to do culinary, right? I just feel that's very, very practical, and it feeds us, right? We're the recipients of that. And then I would like their sport to be Krav Maga or some kind of MMA type of thing. Something where it's really, really practical and beneficial to my two girls, right? Because if they can put someone in a chokehold that shouldn't be touching them, then I could go to sleep pretty safe. Or if they know some Krav Maga, then that'd be sweet.
These are some very good plans.
Right. So right now the plan is to incept them with these goals, like just like, oh man. So we're gonna do this purposely, but they really love watching YouTube cooking channels, and so who knows? Next I just gotta show them some Krav Maga stuff.
Yeah. What type of people do you hope your children will become?
I mean, I hope they find their identity in Jesus, right? I feel like if the root issue, if the core thing is resolved, then at that point I'm like, hey, hopefully the choices then flow out of the core and the roots. So that's really the prayer that we've been having since day one, right? That if their hearts change, then everything will work out, right? But I want them to be reputable. I want them to be known as people who are really fun, who are independent women, right? I mean, they think for themselves. They're strong. I want them to be extremely strong, and not like not like fighting or like jerks, but I want them to be strong. I want them to be confident in who they are as girls and as Asian Americans. But I want them to really, have a grounding in family and just these structures that contribute to human flourishing, right? I want them to be generous, and I want them to be funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want them to have a really good sense of humor about the world, but about themselves too, and not take themselves so seriously.
Yeah, I can train them. Just kidding.
Good. Yeah, good. Send them over.
I guess I just had some like concluding questions. What have been like your proudest accomplishments, do you think, looking back? I know, scary question.
Finishing my first doctorate was mind-blowing. I just because I started and I was single with no kids, with no house, and I finished with a mortgage payment, a wife, and 2 kids. And I have no clue how I finished that. I like looking back, I'm pretty sure my dissertation is trash, but for whatever reason, I defended and got it published. So that's a huge one for me. I just I don't know why I'm going back for a number 2. So that's huge. Another thing is being able to speak on certain stages. Those are some pretty big memorable things where I'm just looking back kind of through past speaking engagements, and I'm just like, man, that's just wild. All right. Like, how did that come about? And, being able to go fly to Malaysia and speak to a group that didn't even know me from the beginning, and taking a shot and just still having relationships with them now. Like that's pretty crazy. Those are some really key highlights. And then making it past year 10 in youth ministry, I knew my goal was 7 years, because that's a whole transitional phase, right? And I was just like, that was already a stretch. But then making it to year 10, I was just like, this is uncharted territory. And then being able to kind of speak into realms where we don't get to play as Asian Americans typically. So writing for certain journals, speaking at certain conferences, being on, getting invited to have a seat at the table, and being influential. If I can, I was like, if I can start paving the way for other Asian American youth ministers to have that voice,
Hmm.
then I'm like, that was huge. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, those are some big ones.
Yeah.
Publishing a children's book, that was also pretty big.
All right. Wait, what was it about again?
So,
I remember
so
seeing it.
the book is called A Simple Reminder,
Mm-hmm.
and I was looking at like children's books because I wanted to like read to the girls when they were young,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, man, kid Christian books, they're either really really shallow or they're really really intense. And I'm like, isn't there like a picture book that's like theologically deep but also like easy? And I couldn't find it, so I was driving to work one day. I'm like, I'm gonna write one. And so on my commute, I wrote a book. And then I had my best friend in New York. He's an illustrator, and so he illustrated and got it published. And I'm like, all
Mhm.
right, well,
Wow,
that's how you get a book sold.
that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
I can read it to my children.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's sold out right now on Amazon
Oh wow. Okay, sorry.
because there's only like 10 copies in publication.
um, so I guess last thing, like, what advice would you give to the youth that are living through this pandemic, and coming out of this pandemic? Like, what are some, yeah, what would be some advice you would give them to handle this
Yeah,
situation?
I think the first one is, and I got this from my mentor. It is okay to not be okay, right?
Sounds familiar.
But it's not okay to stay there, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to not be okay, but it's not okay to stay there.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, if you're struggling, you got to be honest with it. You got to be honest with yourself, right? But then you got to be honest with other people. You got to seek help. And
Right.
so there's no shame in seeking help and asking for help. And I'm like, I don't know if that's a self-preservation thing or an Asian thing or whatever. I think it's just a
Mm-hmm.
pride thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, man, if you need help, go get help. Ask for people, and and maybe it's small to you, right? But
Mm-hmm.
you don't know what the next thing might do, right? Because you don't know if you're at the edge of the cliff or you're the middle, right? You're on like solid the plateau or whatever, but
Mm-hmm.
you just don't know, like because
Right.
it can it can fall really quickly. And so be humble, ask for help. That's the first big thing. um Number two, learn to embrace the time that we're in, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think so many kids are just waiting to get back to normal. And I'm like, that's not a bad thing to ask for, but you're still living in right now. So there's
Right.
still good lessons and there's still time that you're allotted to because you don't know what tomorrow's going to bring, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you have what you have now. And so stop. Yes, it's okay to dream about the future, but don't miss out on what today has for you, right? The lessons, the people you can influence, right? The people
Mm-hmm.
who need you
Yeah.
as a friend, like you still have that time, so don't waste it, right? So that'd be number two. Um, I guess the piggyback of number two is just spend your time wisely
Mm-hmm.
during these days, right? And I'm like, take advantage of what the good things that give you, right? Like hey, a lot of people are stuck with their families, and maybe that's a great thing to get to know who mom and dad are and start to develop these things.
Yeah.
um so it uses time to study for the sake of learning and not so much for the sake of a grade, right? I mean, like,
Mm-hmm.
honestly, because like, they're doing asynchronistic for like half of the time anyways, so why not learn things that you want to learn and learn at this for high schoolers and middle schoolers while it's free.
Right. Yeah.
Like, one thing I wish I told my high school middle school self is, dude, like, college, undergrad, grad school, doctoral programs, like, it's expensive, right? I wish
Mhm.
I would have learned things when it was accessible in the books I had to pay for.
Yeah, that's true. Well, that's all I have, Emily, unless you have anything else.
No, Yeah, that's all I have to.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about, um, Justin?
I don't know. I mean, is there anything else that you want to ask? I mean,
I think it was pretty
um,
solid. I think we covered a lot of
all
territory.
right,
Yeah.
sounds
Okay.
good.
Well, thank you so much again.